The year was 1872, and the land known as Missouri Hollow was a place where the mist never seemed to lift. It crawled between the cypress trees, hung over the swamps like a secret, and clung to the lungs of everyone who lived there. Down an old dirt road, far beyond the town's last lantern, stood a cabin, crooked, lonely, and whispering with the wind. That was the home of widow Eliza Morrow. The people of the hollow spoke her name in hushed voices. They said she kept a chest full of eyes, polished like coins, eyes from dolls, from animals, and maybe, they said, from the dead. Farmers passing her lane claimed to see candlelight flickering behind her curtains, though she lived alone. Children swore they heard whispering voices drifting from her porch. And the old folks, they said the widow Morrow was touched by death, cursed to never forget a single soul she'd ever loved. No one dared to find out the truth. Tommy Lark, just 13, was the youngest messenger in the hollow, a skinny boy with wide eyes and a brave heart. Every week, he delivered letters on horseback from town to the outlying farms. When his boss handed him an envelope addressed to Eliza Morrow, the other boys laughed. "You ain't coming back if you go there," one teased. Tommy pretended to laugh, but his hands trembled as he rode toward the cabin. The world grew quiet the closer he got. Even the birds stopped singing. The trees seemed to lean in, watching. He climbed the steps and knocked once. The sound echoed like it was swallowed by the fog. Then, creak. The door opened slowly. She stood there. The widow. Her silver hair was braided down her back, her dress old but clean, her skin pale as moonlight. Her eyes, pale gray, caught his reflection like two pools of storm water. "You brought the mail?" she asked, her voice soft and clear. He nodded and handed her the envelope. She smiled faintly, reached into her apron and pressed something cold into his hand. "Payment," she said. When Tommy looked down, expecting a coin, he froze. It wasn't a coin. It was a glass eye, smooth and perfect, gleaming like silver under the mist. By sunset, the whole town was buzzing. Tommy showed the glass eye to his mother, who screamed and dropped her dish towel. "You throw that wicked thing in the river right now," she ordered. "That woman's cursed." When the boy told his friends what had happened, the tale grew with every retelling. She pulled it out of a corpse. She steals eyes from the dead. Her husband's ghost helps her collect them. By morning, the hollow had decided. Eliza Morrow was a witch. Even Pastor Henson, who'd once brought her church bread years ago, warned his flock, "Evil walks quietest in the kindest faces." Yet no one could explain how she lived all alone year after year, never leaving, never aging, never crying. And though no one dared visit her again, every night lights flickered from her window, faint glows like hundreds of tiny watching eyes. A month later, a violent storm rolled through the hollow. The sky turned green before the rain fell, the kind of storm that feels alive, hunting. Tommy was on his way back from the mills, his horse fighting the wind. A branch cracked across the road, spooking the animal. The horse bolted, and Tommy was thrown into the mud. Rain lashed his face as thunder growled overhead. Lost, drenched, and bleeding from a cut on his forehead, Tommy stumbled down a hill and saw it. A lantern's glow, faint and steady through the storm. The widow's cabin. Every story, every warning screamed in his mind, "Don't go there." But lightning struck nearby, and fear of the storm beat fear of the widow. He ran to her door and knocked, shaking. It opened. She stood in the doorway, holding a lantern. Her gray eyes reflected the flame. "Child," she said softly, "you'll freeze out there. Come in before the hollow takes you." Her voice wasn't cruel. It was sad, the kind of sadness that carried kindness inside it. And so, trembling, Tommy stepped inside the house everyone feared. The warmth hit him first, a roaring fire, the scent of oak wood and herbs. Then he saw them, the shelves, dozens of shelves, covering every wall lined with glass jars, and inside each jar, an eye, some blue, some brown, some cloudy with age. They shimmered in the flickering light, reflecting the flames like tiny mirrors. Tommy's blood ran cold. You, you really do collect them, he stammered. Eliza turned to look at him, her face unreadable. Yes, she said quietly. I do. He backed away, his breath quick and shallow. She raised her hand gently. Don't be afraid. They can't see you. Then, why? He whispered. She looked toward the shelves with a wistful expression. Because memories fade, boy. But love shouldn't. She poured him tea, black and bitter, yet soothing. As the storm howled outside, her voice softened like a memory brushing against time. The first eye I ever kept, she began, belonged to my husband, Jacob Morrow. He was a soldier. He fought at Antietam. Her gaze drifted toward the fire. They sent him home in a box. When I opened it, his eyes were closed, and I realized I'd forgotten the color. Her voice trembled, but she smiled faintly. So I made one, from glass, the way I remembered him looking at me, calm, steady, full of hope. She reached for a small wooden box and opened it. Inside was a single glass eye, deep hazel, speckled with gold. I made it so I'd never forget how he saw the world, with kindness. Tommy said nothing, and for the first time he didn't see madness, only grief shaped into art. The fever came next, Eliza continued. Cholera. It took half the hollow in 2 months. Tommy listened, silent as she stared into the fire. People buried their loved ones fast, no coffins, no prayers. There were too many. I watched families forget, faces fading from memory before the year was done. She turned toward the shelves, so I made eyes for them. For mothers, fathers, children, each one carries what their loved ones saw in them. She smiled sadly. Not the dead soul's Tommy, the living's remembrance, a piece of how we were loved. Tommy's fear melted away, replaced by something softer. Awe. The witch was not a monster at all, just a woman trying to hold on to what love left behind. The next morning, heavy boots stomped outside. Sheriff Amos Klein stood at the door, rain dripping from his hat, flanked by 2 nervous deputies. Eliza Morrow, he said sharply. We've had complaints. You're frightening folks again. She opened the door calmly. Would you like tea, Sheriff? He frowned. I'd like the truth. He stepped inside and froze. His gaze landed on the shelves of eyes. Good God, he whispered. Eliza folded her hands. They're glass. They look real. They look remembered, she corrected softly. The sheriff swallowed hard. I don't want trouble here. Stay away from town. Don't scare the children. She nodded. I never meant to scare anyone, Sheriff. Only to remember them kindly when the rest forgets. He hesitated, eyes flicking toward the jars once more. Then he tipped his hat and left without another word. By the week's end, every house in the hollow was talking. The sheriff saw it himself. She's keeping the dead. She'll curse the whole valley. Even the pastor declared her an unholy spirit. Children threw stones at her fence. Someone nailed a sign to her gate that read, Witch. Tommy tried to defend her, but no one listened to a boy. Don't go near that house again, his mother warned. You'll bring death on yourself. But not everyone believed the lies. One man, Samuel Pike, a blind veteran who once fought beside Jacob Morrow, decided to see her himself, or rather, to feel what the rest refused to see. When Samuel knocked, Eliza answered with her familiar calm. Mr. Pike, she said softly, you remember the path here? He chuckled dryly. Not with my eyes, widow. but with my heart." He handed her a small note. "My wife says you make eyes, not to see the world, but to remember it. I'd like you to make me a pair, so I can remember what her face looked like before the darkness took it from me." Eliza's lips trembled. "You loved her deeply." "I still do," he whispered. "But memory fades, and I fear forgetting the shape of her smile more than I fear death." That night, Eliza worked in silence. The fire glowed golden as she blew glass, painted blue and green tones, and whispered the woman's name into every flicker of light. When she placed the eyes in his hands the next morning, he pressed them gently to his sockets. He couldn't see her, but his face softened. "I feel her," he whispered. "You've given me back the warmth I lost." And for the first time in years, the blind man smiled through tears. By the following week, word had spread across Missouri Hollow that something unnatural was stirring near Widow Langley's cottage. Livestock were turning up mutilated, and children swore they saw glowing eyes at night near her property. The sheriff, a broad-shouldered man named Calvin Dobbs, decided to ride out and put an end to the gossip. He arrived at dawn, the mist curling over the fields like smoke. "Morning, Miss Langley," he greeted stiffly. "Mind if I come in?" Martha nodded, offering a small smile. "You may, Sheriff, though I don't suppose this is a social call." Calvin glanced around the room, jars gleaming on the shelf, each one lined with marbles that shimmered strangely in the morning light. "Folks are talking, Martha. They say you're keeping eyes in them jars." Martha's lips twitched. "Superstition travels faster than truth, Sheriff. Would you like to see?" Before Calvin could object, she took down a jar, unscrewed the lid, and poured its contents onto her palm. Smooth glass marbles rolled across her fingers, each one catching the light like a droplet of moon. "Just marbles," she said quietly. "The eyes of memory, not of man." Calvin exhaled, half relieved, half unsettled. But as he looked closer, he noticed faint irises painted within them. Not random patterns, but lifelike eyes, each distinct. A strange shiver crawled up his spine. "You paint them yourself?" he asked. "Each one," she whispered. "Every person who's been kind to me, or cruel." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "Be careful, Martha. Some things best left buried." She smiled faintly. "You sound like my husband." When he left, the sheriff told no one what he'd seen, but he never set foot near her property again. A few days later, a young boy named Eli, no more than 10, wandered onto Martha's land chasing his pet crow. He tripped near her porch and scraped his knee. Martha came out, her shawl fluttering in the cold breeze. "Oh, you poor thing," she murmured, kneeling beside him. "You're bleeding." "It's all right, ma'am," he sniffled. "Just wanted to catch my bird." Martha led him inside, cleaned the wound with surprising gentleness, and handed him a small biscuit. The boy looked around at the jars curiously. "Why do you have so many?" he asked innocently. "They help me remember people I loved," she said softly. He squinted. "My mama says you keep ghosts in those jars." Martha laughed quietly, the first real laugh in years. "If only ghosts were so easily caught." As Eli left, he waved. "You're not scary, Miss Langley. You're nice." That night, Martha added a new marble to her shelf, a tiny, perfect blue one, the color of the boy's eyes. But as she placed it in the jar, a faint whisper brushed her ear. "You're starting again." She froze. The voice was her husband's. A fierce thunderstorm rolled into Missouri Hollow. The wind howled through the trees, and lightning split the night sky like a blade. Near midnight, someone knocked at Martha's door. She opened it to find a drenched traveler, tall, gaunt, with eyes as pale as frost. "Ma'am," he said through chattering teeth, "I'm lost. Could I shelter here till the storm passes?" She hesitated, then stepped aside. Of course, sit by the fire. As he warmed himself, his eyes roamed the room, then landed on the shelves of jars. That's quite the collection, he muttered. Martha smiled faintly. People collect coins or stamps. I collect remembrance, but the man's expression darkened. I've seen you before, he whispered. You're the widow they talk about, the witch who steals eyes. Her heart tightened. You should leave in the morning. He stood suddenly, trembling. You cursed my brother. He went blind after meeting you. Lightning flashed, and for a moment her shadow stretched across the wall, long, distorted, monstrous. Leave, she said coldly. He backed away, crossing himself. You'll pay for what you've done. When dawn came, the storm was gone, and so was the man. But beside the hearth, Martha found a coin glinting in the ashes. Only it wasn't a coin. It was a glass eye. That morning, Martha took the jar labeled Samuel Langley from the highest shelf. Inside were two deep amber marbles, her husband's eyes. She held them close, whispering, I didn't mean for it to happen, Sam. Years ago, during the Civil War, Samuel had been a soldier. When he returned home, he was not the man she remembered. Bitter, violent, haunted by ghosts of battle. One night, in a drunken rage, he had struck her. The fall broke his neck. In her grief and guilt, she sat beside his body for days, whispering apologies, until his eyes, glassy and still, reflected her own. She replaced them with marbles from a toy she had bought for the child they never had. I just wanted to keep you close, she said now, tears slipping down her cheeks. You never left me, did you? A faint shimmer rippled across the jar, and she swore she saw the marbles shift, turning toward her like living eyes. Weeks later, Reverend Thomas from the town church paid Martha a visit. He carried a small Bible and an expression of grave determination. Mrs. Langley, he began, the people are afraid. They say strange lights come from your house at night, that they hear voices. Martha offered him tea, but he refused it. You believe them, Reverend? I believe a soul burdened by grief can open dark doors, he said gently. Perhaps it's time to let go of the past. Martha stared into her cup. Letting go means forgetting, and I can't forget. He sighed, stood, and placed a hand on her shoulder. The Lord forgives even the broken-hearted, Martha, but you must forgive yourself. When he left, she looked up at her shelves. All those unblinking eyes watching her. Forgive myself, she murmured. Then who will remember them? Outside, the preacher crossed himself. Inside, the faint sound of glass tapping against glass filled the silence, like coins falling into a well. That night the air grew heavy and strange. The wind carried whispers through the cracks of the cottage, and the marbles on the shelves began to rattle. Martha woke to see a soft light pulsing from within each jar. Shapes began to form inside the glass, faces faint and flickering, like candle flames caught in reflection. Martha, came the whisper, her husband's voice, then others. The boy, the sheriff, the lost traveler. Every soul she'd remembered, every pain she'd bottled. Why do you keep us? They murmured. Why won't you let us rest? Tears streamed down her face. Because if I let you go, I'll have nothing left. The light grew brighter, the air colder. Then one by one the jars cracked. Shards scattered across the floor as the glowing eyes rose, swirling like fireflies. They circled her, and then, in a rush of wind and light, vanished into the night. Martha collapsed to her knees, surrounded by broken glass. The shelves were empty. Morning came quiet and gray. The cottage felt hollow, stripped of its ghosts. Martha wandered the rooms like a sleepwalker, her fingers brushing the bare shelves. For the first time in years, there were no eyes watching her. She stepped outside. The air smelled of rain and new grass. Down the hill, Eli, the boy with the crow, waved from the fence. "Miss Langley," he called. "You look different." She smiled faintly. "Do I?" "Yeah," he said, "like you ain't sad no more." She felt a warmth in her chest, something light and unfamiliar. Maybe it was peace. That night she slept without dreams. But peace has a way of testing its truth. A week later, while sweeping, Martha's broom struck something under her bed. She knelt and pulled out a small jar she'd forgotten, dusty, hidden from sight. Inside were two tiny marbles, gray, cold, unmarked. She frowned. "Whose are these?" As she held the jar to the light, a faint whisper escaped it. "Yours." The jar slipped from her hand and shattered. The marbles rolled across the floor, one stopping at her foot, the other beneath the dresser. In that moment, a strange calm washed over her, and she understood. The last soul she had yet to forgive was her own. That evening, Eli found her standing in the field behind her cottage, holding two lanterns. "What are you doing, Miss Langley?" he asked. "Setting them free," she said softly. She placed the lanterns in the grass and lit them. Their glow rose slowly into the dark sky, drifting upward like twin eyes shining in the heavens. "For everyone I loved," she murmured, "and for me." Eli took her hand. "Will you still stay here?" She smiled. "For a little while longer. But one day, I think I'll go where they are." The boy didn't fully understand, but he nodded. And when the lanterns vanished among the stars, she whispered, "Thank you, Sam." Years passed, and Missouri Hollow changed. The cottage crumbled, the fields grew wild. But some nights, when the mist rolled in thick, travelers swore they saw a soft glow near the ruins. Two lights drifting side by side. Locals began calling it the Widow's Eyes. They said it wasn't a haunting, but a blessing. A sign that love, once found, never truly dies. It simply learns to let go. Eli grew into a man and often told his children, "There was once a woman who collected eyes like coins, but not out of malice, out of love. She taught me that memory is a gift, not a cage." And on quiet nights when the stars were bright over Missouri Hollow, he could still feel her watching, not from jars or shadows, but from the light that never left the sky.